Hi, and thank you for tuning into the Nature Conversations podcast. I'm Dr Adam Forbes. I'm a forest ecologist who specialises in the restoration of New Zealand's forest ecosystems. This podcast isn't about me, however. The purpose of the Nature Conversations podcast is to capture knowledge and insights from remarkable people and to profile important issues for ecology and nature conservation. In this episode, I'm speaking with Amy England, who is the Regional Biodiversity Transformation Manager at the Gisborne District Council. Amy has had a career centred on conservation and has been central to the planning and delivery of the Waingake Transformation Programme. Amy is the perfect person to tell us all about this nationally significant restoration project.
Actually, if we got those threats under control and we focused on those, then nature would do a lot of the work for us. And that's certainly been the case. The pine forest is contiguous with what we call the QE2 bush, which I referred to earlier. It's a massive seed source for us. The other conditions that we have on site, altitude and mean annual temperature and rainfall and all of those things are really conducive to natural regeneration. We had people who joined us who had been working in supermarkets, who had been butchers, who had been working on traffic management. No experience whatsoever in conservation or environmental restoration. And now, those same people have found their passion and their career. They're so dedicated. They've gone back to study. We have a number of them studying environmental science, ecology. They have just had this fire lit inside them.
Okay, well, I'm very excited to have Amy England from the Gisborne District Council on Nature Conversations podcast. Thank you very much for joining me, Amy. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. And thanks very much for the invitation to join you.
You're most welcome. Look, tell me about your professional background and what led you to become involved in the Waingake Transformation Programme.
I started out actually as an outdoor instructor. So, I was working in residential camps and centres, taking kids out sailing and kayaking and things like that. And, there's great value in those activities. But what I found was we had these groups of people in these amazing settings, and I didn't have the confidence to talk to them about the environment that they were in, despite the fact that we were in some amazing places. So, I wanted to change that, and I figured I could either go back to studying or I could try and learn by osmosis and get in amongst people who knew what they were talking about. And so that was the route I decided to take. And to do that, to get a foot in the door, I decided I wanted to work for Department of Conservation. I picked up a summer role as a hut warden for them down on the Milford track. And then from there, I was able to kind of get into a career in conservation and restoration, mainly working for local government and central government. And I moved to Tairāwhiti about 11 years ago and was lucky enough to be doing some work for a local company here, and we were looking at an ecological restoration plan for Ngāi Tāmanuhiri, one of the iwi here, and Waingake is within their rohe. And I had the opportunity to go up to Waingake and have a wander around in what we call the QE2 bush, which is a beautiful piece of primary forest. And I was astounded that Tairāwhiti had this amazing asset that nobody seemed to know about. Just this stunning bush with this incredible wairua. And so I always kept Waingake on my radar after that. And when Council established this transition program, They advertised a couple of roles associated with that, and I saw them come up and I thought, yes, that's me. I want to be working at Waingake. I was kind of obsessed with it, from the first time I went there. So I was really lucky enough to land a role with council as the program manager for the Waingake Transformation Programme. Since then, I've had a little bit of a role change. So I spent 3 years in that role, and now I'm the biodiversity manager for council, and the program itself sits within the wider biodiversity team. So I'm still closely connected to it. Still feel a lot of pride and ownership of it, I guess you could say. Yeah.
Oh, that's super, Amy. It's so neat to see your excitement for the project and for that area. That's super. So what's the Waingake Transformation Programme all about?
So the Waingake Transformation Programme is a partnership program between Gisborne District Council and Mana Whenua Maraetaha Incorporated. And the main aim of the program is to transition a large area within Tairāwhiti's water catchments out of commercial pine forestry and back to an indigenous forest ecosystem. So it's around about 1,600 hectares of pine plantation. There's 1,100 hectares, which is the net stocked area, and then we've got various bits which are in, secondary forest, riparian margins, things like that. But as harvest of the pine plantation progresses, a lot of those areas get quite significantly damaged. So we're treating, the landscape as a whole, and so there's 1,600 hectares there that need to be transitioned. And there's a couple of critical outcomes for the program. The first one is we're using natural infrastructure to provide long-term resilience for our water supply for Tairāwhiti. And the second one is to improve the biodiversity values. So Tairāwhiti only has around about 7% of native bush left in the region. There's been massive clearance historically. So to be able to transition back into a native forest ecosystem on such a large scale provides a massive area of habitat, and we do have a number of threatened species up there that will benefit from that. And I guess the way that we're doing it, the partnership with Maraetaha seeks to share the decision making with Mana Whenua about what happens there on the land. It's looking to reconnect them with their ancestral landscapes and looking to provide meaningful employment and training opportunities as well to get people into careers, not just with council, but in the restoration field as well. So that kind of partnership approach wraps around those outcomes that we're looking for.
Nice. So it's actually quite a significant landscape scale restoration project for Tairāwhiti, Gisborne, is that right?
Size of the area, yes, for sure. And it's probably one of the largest, definitely the largest in terms of a transition out of one land use and into another. We do have some other really large scale projects here on the coast. The Raukumara Paemonga is the big one that springs to mind, but there are a number of others as well.
So tell me a little bit, what has restoration involved? Like, what have been the main interventions or treatments that you've had to carry out up at Waingake?
The project site itself, the landscape up there is really young, soft geology, really prone to erosion as all pretty much the entire east coast landscape is. And so one of the key concerns is around providing protection to the water supply infrastructure that we have up there. So we have 3 water supply dams. We have a pipeline, 40 kilometres of pipeline that runs from those dams back into town here. And we have a number of pump stations and other associated infrastructure as well. And they're really critical assets for our community. They were damaged badly in Cyclone Bowler, which was really one of the reasons why the area was planted in pine in the first place, was to provide some protection and hold those hill slopes together. And now that we're removing that tree cover, it's really important for us to get some Indigenous cover, some permanent cover back in place as quickly as we can. So particularly for the vulnerable areas around our pipeline, we have been treating that through a planting program, mainly looking at planting manuka as a nurse crop, and depending on the slope and the erosion susceptibility, we're planting at different densities. So where we need to, we're planting at reasonably high densities. So that's one of the key treatments is the planting, and then we go back, in following years and look at doing enrichment planting. We're just progressing that into a seed island approach, and we've been doing a little bit of work recently with Tane's Tree Trust. They've been very helpful, providing some advice around that seed island approach to help to bring in some of those later successional species. And the other main interventions have been around controlling the threats, I guess. So the two key ones for us at Waingake were the regenerating pine from the seed bank. We call them wilding pines, and they pose a real risk to the success not only of the planting, but of the natural regeneration that's coming through. And we've had a massive program in place for controlling the wilding pines. And the other one has been controlling pest animal species, and in particular the browsers, so deer, goats, and also pigs. The goats being the main issue for us in the beginning, and we've had 4 years of sustained control now. We've removed well over 3,000 goats. Nearly 1,000 of those were in the first year of control alone. So removing them has really enabled the natural regeneration to flourish, and we're seeing awesome success with that now.
Great. So it sounds like you're getting some successes up there at Waingake. What would you say are the main factors contributing to success at Waingake?
We are getting some good success, although I would say we're only year 4 into what you would understand, Adam, is going to be a really long-term program, and it's going to take a while for us to really determine the success of that. But I think we've laid the foundations. We were lucky to access some really good advice early on in the program, which helped to steer our approach to the restoration and to demonstrate that actually if we got those threats under control and we focused on those, then nature would do a lot of the work for us. And that's certainly been the case where the pine forest is contiguous with what we call the QE2 bush, which I referred to earlier. It's a massive seed source for us. The other conditions that we have on site, altitude and mean annual temperature and rainfall and all of those things are really conducive to natural regeneration. And so in order to allow that to happen, we've really focused on controlling those threats, and I think that's what's driven a large part of the success to date. I'd also say, getting your planning in place early on is really important, and a large part of that is around figuring out what your resourcing needs are and making sure that you have got everything lined up. So we did a lot of work around procurement and securing contractors to do the planting, for the plant supply, for the wilding pine work, etc. We did a lot of work on preparing what I would call a gold standard budget, if you like. So we looked at every little thing that we thought we would need, and we put it all in the budget, and we went big. We asked for a substantial amount of money, but we knew that we couldn't do it half pie. So getting that resourcing and financing into place early on. And then if you don't spend all of that money, well, hey, your accountant's going to love you, right? And we have been able to make savings because we've seen, that really successful natural regeneration happening, and we haven't needed to deliver as much planting as we originally thought. Plants are growing much better than we originally thought, and so we haven't had to do as much post-planting maintenance, things like that. But you need to plan for the worst case scenario, I guess, and plan to deliver every little thing that you think you're going to need to.
How has the project related to people or the wider community?
It's a really good question, and because it's within our water catchments and because it was an active forestry harvest site, it has been a little bit difficult to bring the community on the journey with us. The closed water catchment status means that people need to have permission to enter. We had a lot of health and safety concerns. We had lots of heavy truck movements on the roads and what have you. So we actually haven't had a lot of community activity on the site. However, I think probably where we have been able to connect with people, it's in that partnership with mana whenua. And having mana whenua involved at both the governance level of the project and at the operational level of the project, and making those decisions together, bringing on people who whakapapa back to the iwi to deliver the work on the ground, working with the iwi hunting rōpū to help deliver training and have them involved in the pest control operations. That side of things, I think, has been where our focus has landed. And I think it was where it needed to land. And there will be opportunities, and we're just starting to explore those now that harvesting's pretty much come to an end, around enabling the community to start to get to know this amazing place that they have in their backyard.
Oh, awesome. And I guess part of that might be the Waterworks Bush or the QE2 site. I mean, that's an amazing site that perhaps people might be interested in knowing about as well.
Oh, absolutely. It is such a special place, and we've had a lot of discussions about future uses of, the entire project landscape, including the QE2 bush, and it's a bit of a no-brainer, I think, for us to try to increase public access to that area. I think, there's so many benefits to come from having people interacting in that space.
Okay, Amy, so what's the long-term plan for management of the land?
Another really good question. For now, this project is it sits within Council's long-term plans, our 10-year plan. We have a plan out to 2031 at this stage to continue with the management interventions that we have in place currently. But alongside that, we have our joint steering group with mana whenua, and they have been working on their strategic direction. And part of that will be to start to frame up what the future of the program looks like and the future of the land. And I would say, I can't preempt those decisions, but I would say that it does look like enabling spaces for people to come and interact, whether that's through education programs, recreational opportunities, walking, biking, birding, volunteering opportunities as well. I think that's something that we really need to look into long term. When I think about when I'm not here anymore, what I really hope is that we have this amazing forest for Tairāwhiti, for the benefit of Tairāwhiti, for the benefit of Tairāwhiti's biodiversity as well, and that, our people are able to interact and appreciate this, incredible nature that we've got on our doorstep.
Yeah, super, Amy. That sounds very good. Landscape scale restoration is a very important topic for New Zealand, being such a heavily deforested country and with the biodiversity in a state of ongoing decline. How is what we've learned from Waingake applicable to other areas of Tairāwhiti or to other areas of New Zealand?
Well, you're right, Adam. Here on the East Coast, we're going through a process at the moment of looking at a large-scale land use change. You're probably aware, and listeners might be aware of some of the problems that we've been having with our, land sort of falling away and washing away down our rivers and a lot of woody debris ending up on our beaches and things like that. So there's potentially a whole lot of this transition work to come within our region. And the learnings from Waingake will be really applicable. Every site is different and has its own little quirks and conditions that need to be taken account. But at a broad scale, the learnings around, how setting up for success, doing your planning well, identifying what your main threats are to the success of the project, and putting in some interventions that are going to tackle those early on and in a sustained way, because a little bit of treatment doesn't really go a long way. It's got to be sustained over a long term. So I think those learnings are really key, and we've been able to share some of the learnings as well with others. So we've picked up some interesting learnings around our wilding pine control in particular, and wilding pines are a big issue for New Zealand. So we've been able to determine some patterns in the regrowth of wilding pines on the site, and how you might use some of that information to plan your work programs, plan your budgets. It's just small things, but definitely applicable to other sites, and definitely applicable to the wider restoration picture around the country.
Yeah, it does sound to me like, with you having gone through this and the way you describe your project management, for instance, or the learning with wilding pines, I would expect there would be a lot of that would be transferable to other large-scale restoration sites. That you're probably in a very good position to be helping other people with a style of restoration.
I hope that it's transferable, Adam, and that was one of the key things when we established the program, was thinking about how we can share learnings, and not just share what we're learning, but actually learn from others as well. And we've been able to do that. We've been very lucky to have people who have been very generous with their time and their knowledge come and guide us along the way. So I do hope that we'll be able to reciprocate and do the same for others who may be just starting out on this kind of journey.
And we can include in the podcast some relevant links to help people find you or to read a bit more about the project itself. So yeah, check out the links in the podcast for some further information. So I'm just interested because I gather this is a project that you've been working on for a number of years, and you would have been out in the field and you would have been doing different things and different meetings and different levels of involvement at different types of involvement. I'm just wondering, is there a memorable moment that springs to mind when you think about Waingake and your involvement?
The moment that really sticks out for me is actually when I first grasped the scale of the project. So, I'd been brought on, I'd been interviewed during COVID lockdown, so everything was done online. I was finally kind of able to get into the office, and I'd looked at some maps, but actually I hadn't been up to site. And the first time I went up to site and stood there and looked over the first 100 or so hectares that had been harvested, and then I gazed out across ridges and valleys of pine still yet to be harvested, and I just remember thinking, oh, holy heck, what have I done, and how are we going to do this? The scale of it, the enormity of it really hit me, and I was pretty overwhelmed there for a little while. But luckily, I had some really good support and a whole lot of people who had already done a whole lot of foundational work that we could build on, which was great. And I guess probably, more to the moments that tug on the heartstrings, we've been lucky enough to have had funding through the Jobs for Nature program, and that enabled us to employ 10 kaimahi to come and work on the project, and we broadened the scope somewhat so that we could begin pest control within the QE2 bush, and we had people who joined us who had been working in supermarkets, who had been butchers, who had been working on traffic management, no experience whatsoever in conservation or environmental restoration. And now, those same people have found their passion and their career. They're so dedicated. They've gone back to study. We have a number of them studying environmental science, ecology. They have just had this fire lit inside them, and when you hear them talking about the mahi that they do, the work that they do, when you hear about the passion for the place where they work, it is one of those things that really tugs on the heartstrings. So it's not a memorable moment, but it's the people that I will most remember from this project. Yeah.
Oh, that is so awesome, Amy. Great stuff. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the listeners, or anything else you'd comment on with regard to Waingake?
I think I'd just like to take a minute to acknowledge the people who pushed for this to happen. There were a number of people, going back quite a long time, who recognised the significance of Waingake, and who created a space for this change to happen. And they really had the vision, and all I've had to do is come along and implement that, which to a certain extent is the easy part. Selling that vision and getting it across the line definitely wasn't the easy part. And to our mana whenua partners who have been really future focused and positive to work with as well, I'd really like to acknowledge them. And also I think we've been really lucky to have some amazing external funders help us along on this journey too. So, I should give them a plug. Trees That Count here in New Zealand, One Tree Planted, who are based in North America, but jumped on board with us as their first project in New Zealand, and they've been with us since the beginning. And also our central government funders, MPI and DOC through the Jobs for Nature program as well. We wouldn't have achieved the successes that we have without all of these people and organisations coming together. So it's a really collaborative effort when you're working, at this kind of scale.
Well, I would say we'll wrap it up here, but thank you so much for joining me. And I would say keep up the great work yourself and all your colleagues and people working on this. And I hope people can contact you and that's a help to them. And I just think you're doing a really great thing up at Waingake. Keep it up.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for inviting me along today. And very open to people contacting us if they want to. Happy for you to share contact information with people too.
Great. Yep. I'll pop that in the episode description. But thanks very much for joining me, Amy.
Adam, ka kite.
Amy has worked up through the ranks of a career in conservation, and her enthusiasm for restoration is clear to see. She has grasped the challenges of landscape scale restoration with both hands, and over several years has successfully navigated the management of what, on first impression, seemed to be an overwhelming task. Waingake provides a model for major land use change, conducted in partnership with Māori, where decision-making is shared, where Indigenous people are reconnected with ancestral landscapes and offered learning opportunities and careers in restoration. Waingake is an example of the application of nature-based solutions to protect critical water supply infrastructure in a highly erosion-prone landscape. The project is also an example of well-resourced, sustained management for forest restoration outcomes. Amy described threat management in the form of wilding pine control and addressing browsing pest animals as having been a large part of success to date, as has been gold standard level of budgeting and project management to ensure the project is adequately resourced. Amy reflected that if threats are under control, nature would do a lot of the work in restoring forest cover at Waingake. She said this was due to massive local seed sources, favourable altitude, temperature and rainfall, all making the land very conducive to natural regeneration. Waingake is a prime New Zealand example of land which is suitable for landscape scale restoration using assisted natural regeneration techniques. Thanks for talking us through this project, Amy. Waingake is a good site to keep an eye on in the future as one of New Zealand's leading examples of partnership with Māori on landscape scale land use change led by objectives of nature-based solutions and biodiversity restoration. Once again, well done to all involved. It's a credit to see such long-term commitment to landscape scale restoration. As Amy said, a little bit of treatment doesn't go far in today's landscapes. A sustained effort is required, and that's exactly what Gisborne District Council and partners are doing. Keep up the great work, and I hope this chat with Amy has been an inspiration to others. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Nature Conversations podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, remember to subscribe so that you can be notified of future episodes. If you'd like to help support the production of the podcast, you can do so via my Patreon account. The link is in the episode description. Thanks very much for listening, and be sure to check in again soon.